A millionaire lived locked away in a mansion for 7 years after his wife's death, until a virgin maid crossed the gate that no one dared to open. And now she might be the next to disappear. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment saying where you're listening from. The intercity bus coughed black smoke as it climbed the winding road that cut through the hills along North Carolina's northern coast. Emily Carter clutched her worn leather suitcase to her chest, feeling her stomach turn with each sharp curve. Through the fogged window, the grey and turbulent sea stretched out, crashing against the rocks with a violence that seemed to echo something inside her that she didn't even know existed. It was March 2023, and the stubborn summer still clung to the skin like an unfulfilled promise. Emily had turned 22 the previous week, but the celebration consisted only of her grandmother Dorothy, and a cornbread cake bought from the corner bakery. Now 3 days later, she was alone on that bus, heading to a small town with an unpronounceable name to work in a house that her grandmother always described in whispers, as if the words could summon things best left undisturbed. The Montgomery Mansion, Dorothy had said. Making the sign of the cross is a place that charges a price from those who enter. But Ruth, who worked in the kitchen for 15 years, assured me it's honest work. And you need honest work, child. Emily wasn't quite sure what honest work meant in her grandmother's mouth, but she knew it meant distance from men, from temptations, from the sins that seemed to lurk anywhere. There were too many people gathered. Dorothy had raised her with a fear of the world, especially the part of the world that wore long pants and had deep voices. Men are wolves to women, she would always repeat, and a proper woman doesn't give wolves an opening. The bus stopped with a jolt in the small town's main square, which looked more like a hamlet forgotten by time. Weathered colonial houses leaned on one another like old gossips whispering secrets, the smell of salt spray mixed with the aroma of fried fish and hot oil coming from a makeshift stand on the corner. Emily stepped down on wobbly legs, pulling her suitcase and looking around for someone who might point the way to the mansion. "Are you Miss Dorothy's girl?" The voice made her turn around. A middle-aged man, sun-weathered with faded blue eyes, observed her with an expression that was both curious and concerned. He wore a fisherman's shirt and smelled of sweat and salt. "I'm Emily Carter, yes, sir. Joe Raymond. Miss Ruth asked me to fetch you." He took her suitcase without ceremony and began walking toward an old pickup parked in the shade of a live oak tree. "You sure you want to work up there?" Emily frowned. "Why wouldn't I?" Joe Raymond stopped in the middle of the street and faced her with a seriousness that made her swallow hard. "That house, it's hungry, girl. And you look like someone who hasn't learned to defend herself yet." Before Emily could ask what he meant, Joe Raymond had already placed her suitcase in the truck bed and started the engine. The journey to the mansion was made in silence, with only the sound of the wind cutting through the open windows and the engine's rumble as they climbed the dirt road that wound up the hill. The Montgomery Mansion appeared like an apparition at the top of the cliff. It was an imposing and melancholy structure, with 3 stories of tall windows and ornate wrought-iron balconies that looked like decorated cages. The walls, which must once have been white, now sported the dirty grey of time and sea spray. Wild vines climbed the columns of the main entrance, giving the facade an air of romantic abandonment, as if nature were trying to reclaim the house for itself. But what impressed Emily most was the location. The mansion was literally suspended over the sea, built on the edge of a cliff from which one could see miles of ocean. The wind was constant and strong, carrying the cry of the seagulls and the deafening sound of waves breaking on the rocks far below. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Miss Ruth is waiting for you," said Joe Raymond, leaving the suitcase on the porch and departing without further explanation. Emily took a deep breath and pulled the heavy bronze knocker. The sound echoed inside the house like a muffled scream. It took several minutes for the door to open, revealing a black woman of about 60, short and plump, with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and a flowered apron tied around her waist. "Emily! Thank God you're here." Ruth pulled her into the house and quickly closed the door as if something might enter with her. "Child, you're the spitting image of your grandmother when she was young. The same frightened doe eyes." The entrance to the mansion was spacious and dark, with an extremely high ceiling and a noble wooden staircase that curved up until it disappeared into the gloom of the second floor. The floor was black and white marble, forming geometric patterns that seemed to hypnotize anyone who looked at them for too long. Heavy old furniture occupied the corners, covered with white sheets that made them look like immobile ghosts. "The house is big," said Ruth, leading Emily through the main room. "But don't be fooled into thinking it's a lot of work. Mr. Nathan only really uses 3 rooms, his study, his bedroom, and the library. The rest? Well, the rest has been frozen in time for 7 years. Emily was about to ask a question about the employer when a dry noise echoed from upstairs. Ruth stiffened and lowered her voice. He must have woken up. "Come, I'll show you to your quarters, and then you'll learn the routine." They followed a side corridor until they reached a small but cozy room with a window that looked out onto the back garden. The bed was simple, but the sheets smelled of lavender. There was an old dresser and a crucifix on the wall. "You'll take your meals with me in the kitchen. Work starts at 7 in the morning and ends at 5 in the afternoon. Mr. Nathan, he's a reserved man. Doesn't like conversation, doesn't like noise, doesn't like too many people around. You clean, organize, and disappear. Understand?" Emily nodded, but her curiosity was on fire. "Miss Ruth, may I ask?" "About his wife who died?" Ruth's face closed like an oyster. "Girl, there are some subjects best left alone. Miss Olivia has been resting in peace for 7 years, and those who meddle with the dead might wake things that shouldn't be awakened." That night, Emily could hardly sleep. The room was quiet, but the entire house seemed to breathe around her. There were whispers of wind through the cracks in the windows, creaks of wood settling, and a constant hypnotic sound of waves hitting the cliff. From time to time, she heard slow footsteps echoing on the floor above, as if someone were walking unhurriedly through the dark corridors. In the early morning hours, she woke up thirsty and went down to the kitchen. The house was plunged into an almost solid darkness, broken only by the beams of moonlight that entered through the tall windows. She was returning to her room with a glass of water when she heard the sound of a piano. They were melancholic chords, played with a delicacy that contrasted with the force with which the wind beat against the windows. Unable to contain herself, Emily followed the sound until she found herself before a half-open door. Through it, she could see a man sitting at the piano, his back to the entrance. He was tall and thin, with dark hair that fell over his neck, and his long hands danced over the keys with a precision that seemed painful. When he stopped playing and slowly turned his face toward the door, Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Nathan Montgomery had a face sculpted as if it were a work of tragic art, with angular features and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There was a brutal beauty to him, the kind that hurts just to look at. Their eyes met for a moment that seemed eternal. Emily felt something stir inside her, a kind of hunger she couldn't name. And he looked at her as if he were seeing a ghost he had long expected to meet. Emily woke up the next morning with the feeling that she had dreamed something important, but the dream slipped from her memory like water between fingers. The encounter with Nathan at the piano seemed unreal in the daylight, but the memory of his eyes still burned on her skin like an invisible mark. She went down to the kitchen, where Ruth was already preparing breakfast. The woman greeted her with a tense smile and placed before her a plate with pancakes, scrambled eggs, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. "Sleep well, child?" "More or less." Emily hesitated before continuing. "Miss Ruth, last night I heard a piano." Ruth's spoon stopped in mid-air. "Piano?" "Aye, sir, someone was playing. Beautiful music, but sad." Ruth slowly lowered the spoon and sat down across from Emily with a concerned expression. "Child, that piano has been closed for 7 years. Since Miss Olivia died, Mr. Nathan hasn't touched it. But I saw him playing. I was sure it was him." "You saw?" Ruth stared at her with wide eyes. "Did you really see, or did you think you saw?" Emily felt a chill in her stomach. She was absolutely certain of what she had witnessed. The man at the piano, the melancholy music, the moment when their eyes met. It couldn't have been a dream. It was too real, too vivid. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you," continued Ruth, lowering her voice. "This house has its quirks. Sometimes it shows things that aren't there, or that once were but insist on returning. Miss Olivia played the piano every night. Said music calmed her nerves. After she died, sometimes I still hear—" Ruth stopped and shook her head. "Old woman's nonsense. Let's get down to business. Today you'll start with the library on the 2nd floor. Mr. Nathan goes down to his study around 9. So you have time to clean upstairs. Emily spent the morning in the library, an impressive room with shelves that went from floor to ceiling, filled with books in English, French, and Spanish. The dust danced in the rays of sunlight that entered through the tall windows, and there was a smell of old paper and dampness that wasn't unpleasant, just melancholy. While cleaning, she couldn't stop thinking about what Ruth had said. The house showed things that weren't there. It was impossible. She wasn't a fanciful person. She never had been. Grandmother Dorothy had raised her with her feet firmly planted on the ground, and her mind far from superstitions. It was when she was organizing a stack of books that she found something that made her pause. Between the pages of a volume of Emily Dickinson's poetry, there was a photograph. It was of a beautiful woman, with wavy blonde hair and clear eyes that seemed to laugh at whoever looked at them. On the back, a dedication, "For my eternal love, Nathan, your Olivia." 2014. Emily studied the woman's face for long minutes. There was something familiar about those features, a delicacy that contrasted with the strength of the smile. Olivia had been truly beautiful, the kind of beauty that must have turned heads wherever she went. It was easy to understand how a man could fall so in love with her that he would become a recluse after losing her. "You shouldn't be touching that." The grave voice made Emily drop the photograph. She turned quickly and came face to face with Nathan Montgomery, standing in the library door. In daylight, he seemed even more imposing than in the dim light of the previous night. He was dressed in a white linen shirt and dark pants, his hair combed back, but there was something wild in his eyes that belied the elegance of his attire. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm sorry. The photo fell from the book when I was organizing it." Emily bent down to pick up the image from the floor, but Nathan was faster. He approached with slow steps, picked up the photograph and stared at it for a moment that seemed eternal. Emily could see pain cross his face like a shadow. "Olivia always liked to hide things in books," he said, his voice rough. "Photos, letters, dried flowers. She said that's how memories stayed preserved forever. She was a very beautiful woman." Nathan raised his eyes from the photo and looked at her directly. Emily felt her heart race. Up close, he was even more devastating. There was an intensity to his gaze that made her feel naked, as if he could see through her skin to her soul. "Beauty can be a curse," he said, tucking the photo in his shirt pocket, "especially when it comes accompanied by other less virtuous qualities." Emily didn't know how to respond. There was a bitterness in his voice that suggested stories she didn't know, secrets that only time and pain could reveal. "You look like her," continued Nathan, stepping closer. "Not physically, but there's something, a purity that she had in the early days. Before—" He stopped mid-sentence and shook his head, as if chasing away unwanted thoughts. "Before what?" asked Emily in a voice lower than she intended. Nathan studied her in silence for long seconds. Emily could feel the heat emanating from his body, a masculine scent mixed with something that smelled like wood and sea. There was something hypnotic about the way he looked at her, as if he were trying to decipher a riddle. "Before discovering that purity and goodness don't always go together," he said finally. "Finish your work, Emily, and the next time you find something you shouldn't, leave it where it was." Nathan left the library, leaving Emily with her heart racing and a strange feeling in her stomach. There was something in his tone, a mixture of warning and sadness, that left her restless for the rest of the day. That afternoon, while cleaning the main hall, Emily noticed details she had missed the day before. The walls were decorated with old portraits of the Montgomery family, serious and haughty faces that seemed to judge anyone who passed by. But there was no portrait of Olivia. It was as if she had been erased from the family history. At the end of the day, when Ruth said goodbye to return to her house in town, Emily was left alone in the mansion for the first time. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the constant wind and the sound of the waves. She ate dinner quickly in the kitchen and went up to her room, determined to sleep early. But sleep didn't come. The house seemed more alive at night, with its creaks and whispers. Emily lay listening to every sound, every movement of the wind in the garden trees, every beat of the waves on the cliff. It was around midnight that she heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing in the corridor of the floor above. Emily got up and went to the window. The garden was bathed in the light of the full moon, creating dramatic shadows among the trees. That's when she saw a figure crossing the garden toward the cliff. It was Nathan. He walked like a sleepwalker unhurriedly to the edge of the cliff where there was a stone bench facing the sea. He sat there and remained motionless, looking at the infinite ocean. Emily watched for almost an hour. Nathan didn't move once, as if he were a statue. There was something so solitary about that image that she felt a pain in her chest. Without thinking too much about what she was doing, she quietly descended the stairs and left the house. The night wind was strong and cold, laden with salt and moisture. Emily walked through the garden until she was a few meters from Nathan. He must have sensed her presence because he spoke without turning around. "You should be sleeping." "So should you," she replied, moving a little closer. "This place isn't safe at night. The cliff is treacherous and the wind can be stronger than it seems." Emily sat down on the bench beside him, maintaining a respectful distance, but feeling his presence like physical heat. "Why do you come here every night?" Nathan finally looked at her. In the moonlight, his face seemed carved in marble, beautiful and cold at the same time. "How do you know I come every night?" "Intuition." He sketched what could have been a smile if it weren't so sad. "I come because this is where I feel closest to her." And furthest at the same time. Nathan turned his gaze back to the sea. "Olivia died down there, on the rocks. And I couldn't save her." Emily felt her heart tighten. "Was it an accident?" Nathan's silence was an answer in itself. Emily understood that she had just touched an exposed nerve, a wound that had been bleeding for 7 years. "You should be afraid of me," he said, still looking at the sea. "Everyone in town is. Why should I be? Because sometimes I don't even know what I'm capable of." Nathan's words kept echoing in Emily's mind over the following days. "Sometimes I don't even know what I'm capable of." There was something about the way he had said it, a mixture of confession and warning, that made her wake up in the middle of the night with her heart racing. The routine at the Montgomery mansion was quickly established. Emily cleaned the rooms designated by Ruth, always avoiding the places where Nathan might be. But it was impossible not to feel his presence. He moved through the house like a shadow, and Emily had developed a kind of internal radar that always knew where he was. During breakfast, a week after her arrival, Ruth seemed especially nervous. She stirred the sugar in her coffee with abrupt movements and constantly looked at the window, as if expecting to see something unwanted. "Miss Ruth, are you all right?" "Emily, child, I need to go to Charlotte today. My sister is sick and is going to have surgery." Ruth sighed deeply. "I'll be gone for about 3 days. You'll have to stay alone in the house with Mr. Nathan." Emily felt her stomach knot. 3 days alone with that man who made her feel things she didn't even know existed. "I don't know if that's a good idea, Miss Ruth. There's no other way, child. And look, you seem like a sensible young woman. Just try not to get in his way too much, understand? Nathan is a good man, but he's a wounded man. And a wounded man can be dangerous without meaning to be." Ruth left that same morning, leaving Emily with a list of instructions about Nathan's meals and the rooms that needed cleaning. "He likes his coffee strong, lunch at 2 o'clock sharp, and doesn't mind if dinner is simple. And Emily," she had said before getting into the taxi, "if anything strange happens, you take your things and go to town." Promise? Emily had promised, but deep down she knew she wouldn't keep it. There was something about that house, about that man, that held her with invisible threads. The more she tried to keep her distance, the more she felt drawn to him. The first day alone with Nathan was tense. He appeared for lunch at precisely 2 o'clock, greeted her with a nod and ate in silence. Emily served rice, beans, grilled fish and salad, discreetly observing how he moved. There was a natural elegance to his gestures, but also a rigidity, as if he were always controlling himself. "The food is good," he said, surprising her. "Thank you. Miss Ruth taught me her fish seasoning recipe." Nathan looked at her for a moment that extended beyond what was comfortable. "So you cook better than she does." Emily felt her face heat up. "That's kind of you." "I'm not usually kind out of courtesy." Nathan rose from the table. "I need to work in the study. If you need anything, you can knock on the door." During the afternoon, Emily focused on cleaning the living room, a spacious room with antique furniture and a huge fireplace that hadn't been used in years. She was dusting a sideboard when she found a drawer that was stuck. She pulled harder and it suddenly opened, scattering papers on the floor. Crouched down, collecting the documents, Emily saw they were newspaper clippings. Alti, about the death of Olivia Montgomery. Businessman's wife dies in domestic accident. 28-year-old woman falls from cliff during storm. Police investigate suspicious death at coastal mansion. Emily, read the headlines with her heart racing. The articles spoke of mysterious circumstances, contradictory witnesses, an investigation that never went anywhere. There were photos of Olivia smiling at social events, always elegant, always radiant, and photos of Nathan, much younger, with a somber expression as he spoke with police officers. Interesting reading? Emily was so startled that she dropped the papers again. Nathan was standing in the doorway of the room watching her with an unreadable expression. "Mr. Montgomery, the drawer got stuck and you decided to read everything you found." He approached slowly, picking up the clippings from the floor. "It's understandable. Everyone is curious about the Black Widow and the suspicious husband." "That's not what isn't it?" Nathan crouched down beside her, so close that Emily could feel the warmth of his skin. "Then tell me, Emily, what did you think of the articles? Do I seem like a murderer to you?" Emily looked at him, searching for signs of anger on his face, but all she saw was a deep sadness, an exhaustion that seemed to have settled into his soul a long time ago. "I think you're a man who lost someone he loved and never managed to forgive himself for not being able to save her." Nathan remained motionless for long seconds, as if Emily's words had the power to freeze him in time. "You know nothing about what happened," he said finally, but without aggression. "Then tell me, why? Why do you want to know?" Emily hesitated. How to explain that she felt a connection with this man that went beyond reason? How to say that she woke up every night thinking of him? That she felt an attraction that was physical, but also spiritual? "Because," she took a deep breath, "because I care about you." Nathan studied her with his dark eyes, as if trying to read her soul. Slowly, he extended his hand and touched her face just with the tips of his fingers. Emily felt an electric current run through her entire body. "You should run from me, Emily. You should take your things and never look back. Why can't I decide that for myself?" Nathan's hand moved down her neck, leaving a trail of fire on her skin. Emily closed her eyes, losing herself in the sensation. It was the first time a man had touched her that way, with a mixture of reverence and desire that left her dizzy. "Because you're pure," he whispered, "and I'll corrupt you." "What if I want to be corrupted?" The words left Emily's mouth before she could stop them. It was as if someone else was speaking through her, someone braver, more daring. Nathan pulled his hand away as if he'd been burned. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." Emily stood up, her heart beating erratically. "I know that I've never felt anything like what I feel when I look at you. I know I wake up every night thinking about your eyes. I know that—" "Stop." Nathan stood up too, running his hands through his hair. "You're 22 years old and you've never been with a man. You're confusing attraction with love. How do you know I've never been with a man?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "Because it's written in every movement of yours. In the way you blush when you look at me, how you tremble when I come close, how you breathe differently when I'm near." Emily felt her face catch fire, but she didn't look away. "And is that a problem?" "It's a problem because you don't know who you're dealing with." Nathan approached again, but this time his presence was almost threatening. "Because when I touch you, it won't be with the delicacy you deserve. Because I carry a darkness that could swallow you. And if I don't care." Nathan stared at her for long seconds. Emily could see a war happening in his eyes, desire fighting against conscience. "You should care," he said finally. "Olivia didn't care either. And look how she ended up." With those words, Nathan left the room, leaving Emily alone with her racing heart and a feeling of emptiness in her chest. She collected the last newspaper clippings and put them in the drawer, but couldn't get the expression on his face when he mentioned Olivia out of her mind. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house, waiting to hear Nathan's footsteps in the corridor above. But the house remained silent. It was almost dawn when she heard it. Not footsteps, but music. The piano again, playing a melody she had never heard, but which seemed familiar, like a lullaby from childhood. This time Emily didn't hesitate. She went downstairs and followed the sound to the music room. The door was open, and Nathan was sitting at the piano, playing with his eyes closed. There was an expression of pain on his face, as if each note were being torn directly from his soul. Emily approached slowly and sat on the sofa near the piano. Nathan opened his eyes and saw her but didn't stop playing. "This music," she said softly, "it's beautiful. Sad but beautiful." "I composed it for Olivia," he replied without stopping playing, "on our first wedding anniversary. She said it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for her." "You loved her very much." Nathan stopped playing and looked at the piano keys. "I thought I did, but I discovered there's a difference between loving someone and being obsessed with someone." "What's the difference?" Nathan turned on the piano bench and faced her directly. "Love liberates. Obsession imprisons. And I kept Olivia locked in a golden cage until she couldn't take it anymore." Emily felt something break inside her chest. There was a brutal honesty in Nathan's words that made her understand that he wasn't trying to redeem himself, only telling the truth. "Is that why she died?" "She died because she tried to run away from me on a stormy night. And I let her run." Nathan's words hung in the air like a confession that couldn't be undone. Emily stared at him, trying to process what she had just heard. "I let her run." There was a devastating guilt in those 4 words, a self-condemnation that explained the 7 years of reclusion. "You let her?" Emily slowly rose from the sofa. "What do you mean, let her?" Nathan closed the piano lid with an abrupt movement and stood up. In the dim light of the room, illuminated only by the moonlight that entered through the tall windows, he looked like a creature from a romantic nightmare. Olivia wanted to separate. For months she had been saying she felt suffocated, that I was too possessive, too controlling. He walked to the window and stood with his back to Emily. That night, she packed a suitcase and said she was leaving. There was a terrible storm outside, lightning cutting the sky. Rain like I'd never seen. Emily approached slowly, as if he were a wounded animal that might flee at any sudden movement. "And you tried to stop her?" "No." The word came out as a bitter whisper. "I was tired of begging, tired of fighting, tired of trying to hold on to someone who clearly didn't want to stay. So when she said she was leaving, I opened the door and said, 'Go.'" Nathan turned to face her, and Emily saw tears glistening in his dark eyes. 5 minutes later, I heard the scream. I ran outside and found her on the rocks with her neck broken. His voice faltered. "If I had tried to stop her, if I had run after her, if I had been less proud." "It wasn't your fault," said Emily, extending her hand toward him but without touching him. "Wasn't it?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "I made her life a hell for 2 years. I controlled who she talked to, where she went, what clothes she wore. When she said she wanted to have children, I agreed because I thought a baby would keep her more tied to me. And when she lost the child—" He stopped, passing his hands over his face as if trying to erase the memories. "She lost a baby in the 4th month of pregnancy. And she blamed me. Said it was the stress, the constant pressure, the lack of freedom." Nathan moved closer to Emily, his eyes shining with a dangerous intensity. "You still want to be near me, knowing what kind of man I am?" Emily looked at him for long seconds. There was something devastatingly honest about the way he exposed himself, as if he wanted her to run away from him, as if he were testing how far her compassion could go. "I think," she said slowly, "that you've punished yourself for 7 years for something you've already understood was wrong. And I think continuing to live like a ghost won't bring Olivia back." Nathan studied her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't figure out. "You have a kindness that is almost cruel," he said, coming a step closer. "Makes a man want things he doesn't deserve. And what things do you want?" The question came out bolder than Emily intended. She could feel the air thickening between them, charged with a tension that made her skin tingle. Nathan approached until he was just inches from her. Emily could feel the heat emanating from his body, the masculine smell mixed with something that reminded her of cedar and sea. "I want to touch you," he said, his voice husky. "I want to kiss you until you can't breathe. I want to make you mine in a way you'll never be able to forget." Emily felt her heart race. His words were charged with a dark promise that both frightened and excited her. "And what's stopping you?" "The fact that when I do this—" Nathan raised his hand and lightly touched her face. "It won't be just once. It will be forever. And you'll discover what kind of man I really am. Maybe I already know." Nathan tilted his face toward hers but stopped a few millimeters from her lips. Emily could feel his breath mingling with hers. "I don't know," he whispered. "But you will find out." The kiss, when it finally happened, wasn't gentle. Nathan kissed her like a man who had been dying of thirst and finally found water. Emily felt her legs weaken and clung to his shoulders, lost in a sensation that was completely new and terrifying. When they separated, both were breathless. Nathan held her by the shoulders, studying her face as if looking for signs of regret. "You're trembling," he said. "I am," admitted Emily, "but not from fear." Nathan closed his eyes as if her words were physical torture. "Go to your room. Emily, now. And if I don't want to, then I'll take you there." There was a dangerous promise in his voice. "And if I do that, it won't be to sleep." Emily looked at him for a few more seconds, feeling a courage she didn't know she possessed. "Maybe that's exactly what I want." Without waiting for an answer, she left the music room, leaving Nathan alone with the piano and his memories. But instead of going up to her room, Emily headed for the kitchen. She needed water, air, anything that would help her process what had just happened. She was drinking a glass of water when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway, shirtless, wearing only the pants he had on before. Emily nearly dropped the glass. "I thought you'd gone to sleep," he said, approaching slowly. "I was thirsty." "So am I." But he didn't get water. Instead, he positioned himself in front of her, blocking any escape route. "Thirsty for something that will condemn me." Emily swallowed hard. Nathan's bare chest was a work of sculpted art, defined but not exaggerated muscles, a small scar near his heart that she wanted to touch. "Emily?" His voice was laden with warning. "If you don't go up to your room now, I'm going to kiss you again. And this time I won't stop. And if I don't want you to stop..." Nathan pressed her against the kitchen counter, his hands supported on either side of her body. Emily felt completely enveloped by him, by the overwhelming physical presence that made her feel small and protected at the same time. "You're a virgin," he said, more as a statement than a question. Emily nodded, her face burning. "And you want your first time to be with a man like me? In this house haunted by the memories of a dead woman?" "I want it to be with you," said Emily, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I don't care where, I don't care when, just don't treat me like a child who doesn't know what she wants." Nathan studied her for long seconds, a visible war happening in his dark eyes. "If I do this," he said finally, "there's no going back. You'll be mine, Emily, completely, and I'm not good at sharing." "I'm not asking to share," Nathan groaned softly, as if she had just tortured him. "You don't know what you're getting into." "Then teach me." It was like lighting a match near gasoline. Nathan kissed her again, but this time his hands moved down her body, exploring every curve with a reverence that made her burn. Emily lost herself in the sensations, in his warmth, in the way his large hands completely enveloped her. When he lifted her and placed her sitting on the counter, Emily felt that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. Nathan positioned himself between her legs, his hands resting on her waist, his dark eyes burning with desire. "Last chance," he whispered against her lips. "Say no and I'll stop." Emily looked at him, seeing in those dark eyes not only desire but also a vulnerability that he tried to hide. There was a wounded man there, someone who had condemned himself to isolation for years and now found himself facing the possibility of connecting again with another human being. "Yes," she said, sealing both their fates. "To everything." Nathan closed his eyes as if he had just surrendered to a temptation that he knew he should not yield to. "May God forgive us," he murmured before kissing her again. This time, when his hands began to explore her body beneath the simple blouse she wore, Emily knew there was no going back. She was giving herself completely to a man who carried more darkness than light, but who made her feel more alive than she had ever felt before. And as Nathan murmured her name against her skin like a desperate prayer, Emily was sure of one thing: she was hopelessly in love with him. And this, she suspected, was just the beginning of a journey that would transform her forever. Emily woke up in Nathan's bedroom with the first light of dawn filtering through the heavy curtains. Her body ached in a way she had never experienced, but it was a good ache, one that reminded her of each touch, each kiss, each moment when Nathan had guided her through sensations she didn't even know existed. He was lying beside her, watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see through her soul. There was something different in his expression, a softness she hadn't seen before, as if part of the armor he carried had been removed during the night. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice still husky from sleep. Emily nodded, feeling her face heat up. In the daylight, the reality of what had happened between them seemed both more real and more surreal. "Don't regret it," said Nathan, as if he could read her thoughts. "Please don't regret it. I don't regret it." Emily turned on her side to face him better. "But this changes everything, doesn't it?" Nathan extended his hand and brushed a lock of hair from her face, the gesture so tender that Emily felt her heart tighten. "It changes everything," he confirmed. "You're no longer just the house employee. You're mine." There was a possessiveness in the way he said it that should have scared Emily, but instead, she felt a strange sense of belonging, as if she had finally found her place in the world. "And you? Are you mine too?" Nathan smiled, and it was the first time Emily had seen him smile for real. It completely transformed his face, making him look years younger. "I've been yours for longer than I should admit," he said. "Since the first day you arrived here with those frightened doe eyes and that purity that made me feel like a predator." Emily felt a wave of heat course through her body. There was something about the way Nathan spoke, a brutal honesty mixed with a tenderness he rarely showed. "Then we're both predators now," she said, surprising herself with her own boldness. Nathan laughed softly. "You, a predator? I don't think you have any idea of the effect you have on me." Before Emily could respond, he kissed her again, and she lost herself in the sensations she was already beginning to know and yearn for. When they separated, both were breathless. "I need to take a bath," said Emily, trying to get up from the bed. "Let's take a bath," corrected Nathan. Getting up too, Emily watched him cross the room naked, admiring the way the muscles in his back moved. There was a natural elegance to his every movement, a confidence that came from years of certainty about his place in the world. The master bathroom was luxurious, with an antique porcelain bathtub and Portuguese tiles that must have cost a fortune. Nathan turned on the bathtub faucet and began to fill it with hot water. "Nathan," said Emily, hugging a robe he had given her, "I need to ask you something." He turned to her, immediately alert. "What?" "Yesterday you said Olivia lost a baby, but I saw newspaper clippings that said she was pregnant when she died." Nathan's expression closed like a door slamming. "Where did you see that?" "In the newspapers that were in the drawer. One of them mentioned that the autopsy had confirmed a 3-month pregnancy." Nathan remained motionless for long seconds, as if processing information that didn't make sense. "That's impossible," he said finally. She didn't. We hadn't been intimate for months." Emily felt a chill in her stomach. "Are you sure?" "I'm absolutely sure." Nathan ran his hands through his hair, agitated. "Olivia and I hadn't had intimate relations for at least 6 months before her death. She said she couldn't touch me, that I disgusted her." His words were laden with an old pain, but there was something more, a genuine confusion that made Emily realize there were pieces missing from this puzzle. "Then whose baby was it?" Nathan stared at her with wide eyes, as if the question were a punch to the stomach. "I never thought—" "The police said there were no signs of—" "So that she wasn't—" He stopped talking and sat on the edge of the bathtub, his face pale. "Nathan, are you okay?" "If she was pregnant with another man's child," he said slowly, "then she didn't run away from me because she felt suffocated. She ran because she was trying to protect the child of whoever was the father." Emily approached and knelt in front of him. "Would that change anything?" "It would change everything." Nathan looked at her with an intensity that made her pull back a little. "It would mean that I spent 7 years blaming myself for the death of a woman who betrayed me. It would mean that—" He stopped, shaking his head. "It would mean what?" "It would mean that perhaps someone lied to me about many things." They spent the rest of the morning in a thoughtful silence. Nathan became distant, absorbed in thoughts that clearly troubled him. Emily tried to maintain a normal routine, cleaning the house and preparing lunch, but she couldn't stop thinking about the revelation she had unintentionally made. In the afternoon, while organizing books in the library, Emily found something that made her stop everything she was doing. Between the pages of a book of sonnets, there was a letter addressed to Olivia but never opened. The envelope, yellowed by time, had a postmark from 2 weeks before her death. Emily looked around, making sure she was alone, and opened the letter. It was signed by someone named Michael, and the words made her feel as if the ground were disappearing beneath her feet. My dear Olivia, I know it's dangerous to write, but I need you to know that the baby will be welcome, regardless of when you manage to get rid of Nathan. I have everything prepared for our escape. The house in Wilmington is ready, and the money I got from the company accounts should be enough for us to start a new life. He will never find us if we are careful. I love you, and I love our child who is yet to be born. Michael. Emily read the letter 3 times before she could fully process what she was seeing. Olivia was having an affair. She was pregnant by her lover, and they were planning to run away together, apparently with stolen money. But if this Michael was waiting for Olivia, what had happened to him when she died? Why had he never appeared to investigate? Why was the letter never delivered? Found something interesting? Emily was so startled that she accidentally tore the letter. Nathan was standing in the library doorway, watching her with an expression that was difficult to interpret. It was just an old letter. Nathan approached slowly. A letter for Olivia? Emily hesitated, but decided she couldn't lie to him, not after the night they had shared. It was from someone named Michael. It talked about the baby, and about them running away together. Nathan was motionless for a moment that seemed eternal. Then he extended his hand. Let me see. Emily handed him the torn pieces of the letter. Nathan read them in silence, his expression becoming darker with each line. Michael Reynolds, he said finally. My former business partner. Your partner? He was. Until I discovered he was embezzling money from the company. Nathan crumpled the pieces of the letter in his hand. I reported him to the police 2 weeks before Olivia died. He fled to Mexico before he could be arrested. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. I think Olivia was running to meet Michael that night, and I think he never knew she had died. Nathan sat heavily in an armchair, or he knew and decided it was better to stay away. This changes everything, doesn't it? Nathan looked at her with an expression that mixed relief and anger. It changes things. It means she didn't die because of me. But it also means she betrayed me in every possible way. With another man, with my money, with lies. Emily approached and knelt beside his armchair. Nathan, it means you can stop blaming yourself. Can I? He looked at her with eyes shining dangerously. Or does it mean that now I have real reasons to hate myself, for having been stupid enough not to realize I was being deceived for years? Emily took his face between her hands. It means you're free, free from guilt, free from the past, free to start over. Nathan covered her hands with his. With you? If you want. Nathan pulled her onto the armchair and kissed her with an intensity that seemed desperate. When they separated, he rested his forehead on hers. I want to, he said, more than I should want to. But even as they kissed again, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there were still pieces missing from this puzzle. If Michael had fled before Olivia died, who was waiting for her that night? And why had she gone out during a storm if she knew her lover wouldn't be there? There was something more to this story, something that had not yet been discovered, and Emily had the strange feeling that when the truth finally came to light, it would change everything again. Perhaps in a way that neither she nor Nathan was prepared to face. Ruth returned from Charlotte 3 days later, and Emily immediately knew she noticed the change. The older woman studied her with experienced eyes as she put away groceries in the pantry. Noting the way Emily averted her gaze, how her cheeks flushed for no reason, how she moved around the kitchen with a bodily awareness she didn't have before. Is your sister better? Asked Emily, trying to sound casual as she prepared breakfast. She is, thank God, the surgery went well. Ruth stopped organizing the groceries and turned to Emily. And here? How were these 3 days? Emily felt her face catch fire. Quiet. I took care of the house, cooked for Mr. Nathan. And anything else? Ruth's tone wasn't accusatory, but there was a maternal concern that made Emily feel like a teenager being questioned about where she had spent the night. Miss Ruth. Child. You don't need to tell me anything, but let me give you some advice from a woman who has lived a lot. Ruth approached and lowered her voice. A man like Nathan Montgomery is a fire that burns beautifully but leaves a mark. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Before Emily could respond, Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was dressed in a white dress shirt and dark pants, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked more rested than Emily had seen him in weeks. "Good morning, Ruth. How was the trip?" "Good, Mr. Nathan. Thank you for having allowed Emily to help me here." Emily frowned. She hadn't helped Ruth with anything, but the older woman gave her a warning look that made her stay quiet. "Of course. Emily has proven very helpful." The way Nathan said this with a small smile at the corner of his mouth made Emily swallow hard. "I'll go get the newspaper," said Ruth, clearly wanting to give them privacy. As soon as they were alone, Nathan approached Emily and kissed her lightly on the neck, just behind her ear. The simple gesture sent a shiver through her entire body. "I missed you this morning," he whispered. Emily had returned to her own room the night before, trying to keep up appearances for when Ruth returned. But waking up alone after 3 mornings in the warmth of Nathan's arms was harder than she had imagined. "I missed you too," she admitted. "Tonight," said Nathan, his hands resting on her waist, "I won't let you escape." Emily was about to respond when she heard Ruth screaming from outside the house. Both ran to the porch and found the woman standing in the middle of the garden, pale as paper, holding the newspaper with trembling hands. "Miss Ruth, what is it?" Ruth pointed to the front page of the local newspaper. The headline read, "Body of fugitive businessman found on Mexico coast after 7 years." Nathan took the newspaper from Ruth's hands and read aloud, "The body of Michael Reynolds, a North Carolina businessman accused of embezzlement and missing for 7 years, was found last week on a beach in Mexico. According to local police, the state of decomposition indicates that death occurred approximately 7 years ago. The cause of death is still being investigated, but there are suspicions of homicide." Emily felt her blood freeze in her veins. Michael was dead. Dead for 7 years. If he had died around the same time as Olivia, "This means he never fled," said Nathan with a tense voice. "It means someone killed him. And if someone killed Michael," continued Emily, "maybe they also killed Olivia." Ruth looked at them with an expression of panic. "You're talking about murder, here in this house." Nathan slowly folded the newspaper, his mind clearly working. "Ruth, were you here the night Olivia died?" "Yes, sir." "I remember everything. The storm was terrible. Miss Olivia was nervous all day, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Did she receive any calls? Any visits?" Ruth thought for a moment. "Yes, she did. A call around 8 at night. I answered it myself. It was a man's voice asking for her, but it wasn't Michael. I knew Michael's voice." Emily and Nathan exchanged tense looks. "Who was it?" "I don't know. The man didn't identify himself. He just said it was urgent to speak with Miss Olivia." She became even more agitated after the call. "And then?" "Then she went up to her room, packed a small suitcase and came down. She was wearing that red coat she liked so much, and a bag I had never seen before. She said she was going out and didn't know when she would return." Nathan stiffened. "What kind of bag?" "A black leather bag, elegant. Looked expensive. I thought it was strange because I had never seen her use it before." Emily felt a bad premonition. "Was the bag found with the body?" "No," said Nathan slowly. "The police said they didn't find any bag. Just the red coat." Ruth crossed herself. "My God in heaven, do you think someone stole the bag? Or someone took something that was inside it?" said Emily. Nathan was becoming visibly agitated. "I need to talk to the sheriff who handled the case. Maybe it's time to reopen the investigation." "Mr. Nathan," said Ruth hesitantly, "there's something I never told anyone about that night." Both looked at her expectantly. "After Miss Olivia left, I was worried about the storm. I went to the kitchen window to see if she had reached the car safely, but I saw her talking to someone on the porch. To whom? I couldn't see properly because of the rain. But it was a man, tall, wearing a dark raincoat. They talked for a few minutes, and then they walked together toward the cliff." Emily felt her heart race. She wasn't running away alone. "Someone led her to the cliff. Why did you never tell this to the police?" asked Nathan. Ruth lowered her head, ashamed. "Because the next day a man showed up here. Said he worked for an insurance company and was investigating Miss Olivia's death. He asked if I had seen anything strange that night." "And you told him?" "Yes, I did." "About the man on the porch?" Ruth trembled. "He gave me $500 and said it was better if I didn't talk about it to anyone else. That if I did, it could put my whole family in danger." Nathan ran his hands through his hair, clearly disturbed. "What insurance company?" Tastit Tortuhiwa showed me a card, but I can't read very well. I only remember it had a strange name. Started with H. Harmon? Hampton? Something like that. Emily and Nathan looked at each other. Neither knew of any company with that name. Would you describe what this man looked like? Asked Emily. He was older, around 50. Grey hair, light eyes. Very elegant, spoke well. But there was something in his eyes that gave me the shivers. Ruth, said Nathan urgently, did you keep the money he gave you? I did. Never touched it. It's in the cookie tin in my room at home. I need you to bring that money here. The bills might have some clue about who this man was. Ruth nodded, but she looked terrified. Mr. Nathan, do you think I'm in danger? After all these years? Nathan hesitated before answering. I don't know, but we're going to find out. That afternoon, after Ruth left to get the money, Emily and Nathan sat in his study to try to organize the information they had. Let's see what we know, said Nathan, writing on a piece of paper. Olivia was having an affair with Michael. Michael was stealing money from my company. Michael was killed around the same time as Olivia. Olivia received a call from an unknown man the night of her death. She met someone on the porch before she died. A mysterious bag disappeared, and a supposed insurance investigator paid Ruth to keep quiet. Emily studied the notes. It seems like someone orchestrated all of this. Killed Michael, lured Olivia out of the house, and killed her too. But why? If the goal was the money Michael stole, why kill Olivia? Maybe she knew where Michael had hidden the money. Or maybe she had something that could incriminate someone. Nathan stood up and began to pace around the study. If this is true, it means someone has let me believe for 7 years that I was responsible for my wife's death, when in fact she was murdered. Emily could see anger growing in his eyes. It was a cold, controlled anger, but dangerous. Nathan, she said softly, when we find out who did this. When we find out, he said, turning to face her with eyes shining in a way that made her step back. That person will pay. For every day of torment they made me go through. For every night I spent hating myself. For every moment I believed I was a monster. Emily stood up and approached him. We'll discover the truth, together. Nathan pulled her into his arms and kissed her with an intensity that was both desperate and possessive. I don't know what I would do without you, he murmured against her lips. You saved me, Emily, brought me back to life. And you awakened me, she replied, showed me who I really am. But even as they kissed, both knew that the discovery of the truth about Olivia's death was just beginning, and that when they reached the end of that investigation, they might discover things that neither of them was prepared to face. Ruth returned the next morning with a worried face and a small cookie tin under her arm. Her hands trembled as she opened the lid and removed a yellowed envelope with $500 in old bills. I never touched this money, she said, handing the envelope to Nathan. Always gave me bad luck, like it was cursed money. Nathan examined the bills carefully. These are 2016 bills in sequence. This means they came directly from the bank, probably from a business account. Emily approached to observe. Can it be traced? I can try. I have a friend who works at the Federal Reserve. He can get information about the origin of these bills. Nathan put the money away. But first, Ruth, I need you to tell me everything you remember about your time here in the house, about when you started working here. I started in 2010, Mr. Nathan. You had just married Miss Olivia. And before you? Who worked here? Ruth hesitated, looking nervously at Emily. There was a woman who took care of the cleaning. Dorothy, her name was. A very beautiful woman, brown hair, eyes just like Emily's here. Emily felt her heart stop. Dorothy, that was my grandmother's name. Your grandmother? Ruth stared at her with wide eyes. My God in heaven. Your family? Miss Ruth, said Emily, her voice trembling. You knew my grandmother? But she never told me she worked here. Nathan approached, alert. Ruth, when did Dorothy stop working here? It was at the end of 2009. She disappeared from one moment to the next. Never came back, never asked for her settlement, never sent for the things she left here. Ruth crossed herself. I thought it was strange at the time. Dorothy was a woman of her word, responsible, not the type to abandon a job without notice. Emily felt her legs weaken. She disappeared? But that's impossible. My grandmother raised me. She was with me until she died last year. Are you sure it was the same person? Asked Nathan, concerned. Of course I'm sure. Emily turned to Ruth. Can you show me the things she left here? Ruth nodded and led them to a small room at the back of the house that served as storage. In the midst of dusty boxes and covered furniture, there was a small brown leather suitcase. Emily opened the suitcase with trembling hands. Inside were simple women's clothes, some photographs and a diary with a red leather cover. She picked up one of the photographs and felt the air leave her lungs. It was her grandmother, Dorothy Carter, younger, smiling beside a man Emily didn't recognize. On the back of the photo, a dedication. For my eternal love, Dorothy. You're Walter. 1985. Walter? Emily showed the photo to Ruth. Do you know this man? Ruth studied the image. I don't know him, no. But Dorothy sometimes received calls from a man. She would get all nervous, go out to the garden to answer, so no one would hear. Emily opened her grandmother's diary and began to read the last entries. The familiar handwriting brought tears to her eyes, but the content made her freeze with fear. December 15th, 2009. I can't stay here anymore. I've discovered too much. Walter was right about the Montgomerys. This family has blood on their hands, but if I tell what I know, Emily will become an orphan. I need to leave and pretend I was never here. December 20th, 2009, Walter got the fake documentation. I'm going to get Emily from the orphanage and start a new life far from here. She can never know the truth about her parents, never know she was raised by a liar. Emily dropped the diary as if it were on fire. No, this can't be true, sir. Nathan picked up the diary and continued reading aloud. December 25th, 2009. Emily is with me now. She's a sweet, innocent girl. I'll raise her far from here, far from the Montgomerys, far from the truth. She will grow up without knowing her parents died because of this accursed family. My parents, Emily sat heavily on a box. My grandmother always said they died in a car accident when I was a baby. Nathan continued flipping through the diary. Here's more. Emily's parents discovered the money laundering scheme. Walter had evidence, documents that could destroy the Montgomery family. But they were killed before they could deliver everything to the police. The accident was staged. And now I know too much. Ruth was as pale as paper. Mr. Nathan, this means that... It means Emily's family was murdered by the Montgomerys. Nathan closed the diary. And Dorothy discovered it, fled, and pretended to be Emily's grandmother to protect her. Emily couldn't process the information. Everything she knew about her life was a lie. Dorothy wasn't her grandmother. Her parents didn't die in an accident. And somehow her fate had been connected to this house since before she was born. Who is Walter? She asked, her voice choked. Nathan flipped through a few more pages of the diary. It says here that Walter Harmon was a federal investigator, was investigating a corruption scheme involving businessmen from coastal North Carolina. Harmon, exclaimed Ruth. That was the name of the man who paid me to keep quiet. Only it wasn't the same man. The Walter in the photo is younger, thinner. Could be a relative, suggested Nathan. Son, nephew. Emily stood up abruptly. I need air. I need to think. She ran out of the storage room and went directly to the cliff, the place where Olivia had died. The strong wind whipped her hair and the sea spray sprinkled salt on her face, mixing with the tears she couldn't contain. Nathan found her there a few minutes later, sitting on the stone bench with her gaze lost on the horizon. Emily. Everything was a lie, she said without looking at him. My entire life was built on lies. And now I discover that my parents were killed by your family. Nathan sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. By my family, no. By my father, maybe. I never knew any of this. How can I be sure? Emily finally looked at him, her eyes red from crying. How can I trust you, knowing that I carry the blood of people your family murdered? The question was like a punch to Nathan's stomach. He was silent for long minutes, studying her face. You have reason to doubt, he said finally. But let me ask you something. At any point during these weeks did you feel that I was capable of hurting you? Emily hesitated. As much as her mind was in turmoil, her heart knew the answer. No, she admitted. Never. Then trust that. Trust what you feel, not what you discovered today. Nathan extended his hand to her. Let's discover the truth together. The whole truth. Emily looked at the extended hand for long seconds before accepting it. Nathan, what if we discover things that will destroy us? Then we'll be destroyed together, he said, pulling her into his arms. But I won't let the past steal the future we can have. They returned to the house hand in hand, but both knew that the day's discoveries had changed everything between them. Emily wasn't just an innocent young woman who had fallen in love with her employer. She was the daughter of people murdered by his family, and Nathan wasn't just a widower tormented by guilt. He was potentially the son of a murderer. That afternoon, Nathan made several calls. To his friend at the Federal Reserve, to a private detective he knew, to a lawyer specialized in cold cases. Emily organized her grandmother's belongings, or the belongings of the woman she had known as her grandmother, trying to find more clues about her true identity. That's when she found, sewn into the lining of the suitcase, a birth certificate, but it wasn't hers. It was of a child named Emily Carter, daughter of Thomas Carter and Sarah Carter, born in 1999 on the same day as her. Beneath the birth certificate, a note written in Dorothy's handwriting. "If something happens to me, look for Walter Harmon. He has the evidence that will destroy the Montgomerys forever." Emily showed the note to Nathan, who paled as he read it. "Carter was the surname of your real parents," he said. "And this Walter Harmon, he must still be alive. And if he is, then he might have the answers we're looking for. About who killed your parents. About who killed Olivia and Michael. About whoever orchestrated all this." Emily folded the note carefully. "Nathan, I'm afraid of what we'll discover." "So am I," he admitted. "But I can't live the rest of my life without knowing the truth. And you deserve to know who you really are." That night, Emily stayed in Nathan's room, but neither could sleep properly. They lay awake talking about the day's discoveries, trying to fit together the pieces of a puzzle that was becoming more complex with each revelation. "Emily," said Nathan in the darkness, "regardless of what we discover about our families, about the past, you know that I know," she interrupted, snuggling closer in his arms. "Me too." Neither said the word love out loud, but it hung in the air between them, strong and real, even amid all the confusion and pain. Outside, the wind continued to beat against the windows of the Montgomery mansion, carrying with it the whispers of all the secrets that were yet to be revealed. And in the depths of the house, it was as if the ghosts of the past were preparing to finally tell their stories. The truth was coming, and when it arrived, it would change the lives of Emily and Nathan forever, for better or worse. The private detective that Nathan hired managed to locate Walter Harmon in 3 days. He lived in a simple house in the interior of North Carolina, 2 hours by car from the mansion. He was a 72-year-old man, retired from the FBI, who had spent the last few years raising bees and cultivating a small orchard. Emily insisted on accompanying Nathan on the visit, despite his attempts to dissuade her. "If this man has answers about my parents, I need to hear them directly," she said, as they got ready for the trip. Walter's house was at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by pine trees and overlooking a verdant valley. It was the kind of place where someone went to forget the world, or to hide from it. Walter Harmon was a tall, thin man, with completely white hair and faded blue eyes that seemed to carry the weight of many secrets. When he opened the door and saw Nathan, his expression hardened. "Montgomery," he said with no invitation to enter. "I didn't expect you to show up here." "Mr. Harmon," said Nathan respectfully, "I've come with Emily, the daughter of Thomas and Sarah Carter." Walter's eyes turned to Emily and his face immediately softened. "My God, you're just like your mother." Emily felt tears welling up. "You knew my parents?" Walter hesitated for a moment, then invited them in. The house was simple but cozy, with walls covered with books and old photographs. He served coffee and sat before them with a heavy expression. "Thomas and Sarah were my informants," he said, without beating around the bush. "They worked for an accounting firm that provided services to several companies along the coast. They discovered a massive money laundering scheme that involved politicians, businessmen, and even members of the Italian mafia. And my father was contracted by the Montgomery Company?" asked Emily. "He was. And he was the one who discovered that Michael Reynolds was diverting money not only to his own accounts, but to finance drug trafficking operations coming from Mexico." Nathan leaned forward. "Michael was involved with drug dealers?" "Deeply involved. He was using your company to launder dirty money. Your father, Nathan, found out in 2008 and threatened to fire him and report him to the police." "My father died in 2008, said Nathan, confused. Walter looked at him with pity. Your father died because he discovered Michael's scheme. Had a massive heart attack after receiving death threats. It wasn't natural. Emily saw Nathan grow pale. You're saying Michael killed my father? Not directly. But he reported to very dangerous people. When your father became a problem, they solved the problem. Walter stood up and went to a shelf, from which he took a thick folder. Thomas and Sarah were gathering evidence against the entire operation. They had documents, recordings, photographs. They were ready to deliver everything to the FBI when they were killed. How did they really die? Asked Emily, although she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Their car was sabotaged. The brakes were cut on the mountain highway. It looked like an accident, but it was an execution. Walter opened the folder and showed photographs of the accident scene. I knew it was murder, but I couldn't prove it. And you, Emily, were in the car. Emily felt the world spin around her. I was in the car? You were. You were 8 months old. Dorothy was your nanny. She was in the back seat with you when the accident happened. She was the only survivor besides you. That's why she took me, murmured Emily. She felt responsible for me. Dorothy came looking for me at the hospital. She was in a panic, knew that whoever had killed your parents might come after you too. I helped her get fake documents and leave town. Nathan, who had been silent processing the information, finally spoke. If Michael was behind all this, why was he killed too? Walter smiled bitterly. Because he was just a pawn. When things got too hot, when you started investigating the embezzlement in the company, he became a liability. Who was the real boss? Walter hesitated for a moment. You're not going to like the answer. I've already discovered many things I don't like. You can tell me, Olivia Montgomery. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily saw Nathan turn as white as paper. That's impossible, he said finally. Olivia she was just a vain, superficial woman. She didn't have the intelligence to orchestrate a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme, to manipulate powerful men, to eliminate anyone who got in her way. Walter shook his head. Nathan, your wife was one of the most intelligent and dangerous criminals I've ever investigated. Emily felt as if she were living a nightmare. Olivia killed my parents. Not directly, but she was the one who gave the order. Your parents discovered that she was the real head of the operation, that Michael was just her executor. When they gathered enough evidence to destroy her, she eliminated them. Nathan stood up abruptly and began pacing around the room. No, it can't be. I lived with her for 2 years. How did I not notice? Because she was very good at what she did, said Walter. Olivia used you from the beginning. She married you to gain access to the company, to use the Montgomery family reputation as a front for her criminal operations. And when she died? Asked Emily. Oh, she didn't die. Walter smiled sinisterly. At least not that night. Nathan stopped pacing. What do you mean? The woman who was found at the cliff was a look-alike that Olivia hired. Her call girl who physically resembled her. Olivia faked her own death to escape when she realized I was getting close to discovering the truth. Emily felt as if the ground were disappearing beneath her feet. So Olivia is alive? She was until last week, said Walter, picking up a recent newspaper. She was found dead in an apartment in Buenos Aires. Apparently, her former Argentine associates discovered where she was hiding. Nathan sat down heavily. 7 years. I spent 7 years blaming myself for the death of a woman who wasn't even dead. And who had deliberately destroyed your life, added Walter. Nathan, you were a victim as much as any of us. Emily approached Nathan and took his hand. She could see the devastation in his eyes, the way his entire reality was crumbling. There's one more thing you need to know, said Walter. Someone knows you've been investigating. I've received threatening calls in the last few days. Calls from someone who knows details about our conversation today. How is that possible? Asked Emily. Because there's someone in your house who is reporting everything that happens there. Nathan and Emily looked at each other, horrified. Ruth? Whispered Emily. I don't know who it is, said Walter, but someone very close to you is working for the remnants of Olivia's organization. And now that you've discovered the truth, you're in real danger. Walter went to a safe hidden behind a bookshelf and took out a pistol and several envelopes. These are all the pieces of evidence I've managed to gather over the years. Documents, recordings, photographs, everything you need to destroy what remains of the organization. He handed the envelopes to Nathan. But be careful. These people have killed everyone who got in their way. Why are you helping us? Asked Nathan. After all these years, why didn't you hand over this evidence to the police? Walter looked at Emily with a paternal tenderness. Because I promised Dorothy I would protect Emily, and because it's time to bring justice to all who died because of Olivia Montgomery's ambition. They left Walter's house late in the afternoon, carrying the evidence that could finally expose the whole truth. But as they drove back to the mansion, both knew they were returning to a place that might no longer be safe. Nathan, said Emily, watching the countryside pass by the window. If someone in the house is watching us, then we'll find out who it is, said Nathan with a cold determination in his eyes. And we'll end this once and for all. But as they approached the Montgomery mansion, neither could imagine that the person betraying them was someone they completely trusted. And discovering the traitor's identity would put both in much greater danger than they had ever imagined. The truth was finally coming to light. But sometimes the truth has a price that not everyone is prepared to pay. Emily held Nathan's hand as the lights of the mansion appeared on the horizon, knowing that everything that followed would test not only their courage, but also the love that had grown between them amid so many devastating revelations. The question hanging in the air was, would they manage to survive the coming storm? And when it was all over, would anything remain of the love they had found in each other? The next few hours would provide all the answers. The way back to the mansion was made in tense silence. Emily watched Nathan drive, noticing how his hands gripped the steering wheel with excessive force and how a vein pulsed in his temple. Walter's revelations had destroyed everything he believed about his life, his marriage, his very identity. "Nathan," she said softly, "are you okay?" "Okay?" He laughed bitterly. "I discovered that I spent 2 years married to a murderer who killed your parents, faked her own death to make me suffer, and on top of that, has a spy in my house." "I think okay isn't exactly the word I'd use." Emily extended her hand and touched his arm. "I know it's hard to process all this. Emily, do you understand what this means?" Nathan stopped the car on the side of the road and turned to face her. "Your entire life was destroyed because of my family. Your parents died because they got involved with the Montgomery Company. How can you even look at me? Oh, because you're not responsible for Olivia's actions. You were deceived as much as I was. But I should have noticed. How can a man live for 2 years with a woman and not know she's a murderer?" Emily saw the devastating pain in his eyes and felt her heart ache. "Because you loved her. Love blinds us to many things. And now, can you still, after knowing—" Emily didn't let him finish the sentence. She leaned in and kissed him, putting all her certainty into that gesture. "I love you," she said when they separated. "I don't love your family, I don't love your past. I don't love the terrible things that happened. I love you. The man you are, not the man you were forced to be." Nathan closed his eyes and rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know if I deserve—" "It's not about deserving, it's about choosing. And I choose you." They resumed their journey, but as they approached the mansion, both grew more tense. The lights of the house gleamed at the top of the cliff like a sinister beacon, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were returning to a trap. "How will we discover who the traitor is?" she asked. "I'm going to test a few people," said Nathan. "Give different information to each one and see which leaks." They arrived at the mansion around 9 at night. Ruth greeted them at the door with a worried expression. "Thank God you're back. I was getting nervous about this whole trip." "Why nervous?" asked Nathan, studying her face. "Oh, I don't know. After all these discoveries about Miss Olivia and Michael, I worry there might still be dangerous people out there." Emily and Nathan exchanged looks. Ruth's reaction seemed genuine, but after the day's revelations, they couldn't trust anyone. "Ruth," said Nathan, "I need you to stay at your house in town for the next few days. I'll give you paid leave. But Mr. Nathan, who will take care of the house? Tonks, Emily and I will manage. It's just temporary." Ruth hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. "Are you sure you'll be all right here alone?" "We'll be fine," said Emily, forcing a smile. "You deserve a rest." After Ruth left, Nathan and Emily locked themselves in the study to examine the documents Walter had given them. There were hundreds of pages, financial spreadsheets, photographs of secret meetings, transcribed recordings, Detailed reports on Olivia's criminal operations. Look at this, said Emily, pointing to a list of names. Here's a list of all the collaborators in Olivia's organization. Nathan moved closer to see better. I recognize some of these names. Local businessmen, a councilman, even the sheriff who investigated her death. And this one. Emily pointed to a name that made her blood run cold. Tsar Carter, domestic informant. Carter, like your parents. Nathan, do you think Ruth could be related to me? Her last name is Carter, too. Before Nathan could answer, they heard the sound of a car coming up the mansion's driveway. Both looked at each other, tense. Ruth came back? Whispered Emily. Nathan went to the window and peered through the curtains. A dark sedan had stopped in front of the house, and two figures were getting out. I don't recognize the car, he said, reaching for the phone. I'm going to call the police. There's no signal, said Emily, looking at her cell phone. Someone's jamming it. The doorbell rang, echoing through the house like a dark omen. Nathan took a pistol he kept in the study safe. Stay behind me, he said to Emily. They went down to the main hall where the doorbell continued to ring insistently. Nathan approached the door and asked, Who is it? FBI, replied a male voice. We need to speak with Mr. Montgomery about the Michael Reynolds case. Nathan hesitated. It was very late for an official visit, and after the day's revelations he was suspicious of everything. Can you show identification through the window? A man approached the side window and showed an FBI badge. It looked legitimate, but in the darkness it was hard to be sure. Nathan opened the door, keeping the pistol hidden behind his back. Two men entered, one older with grey hair and another younger, who immediately began to observe the house with excessive interest. Agent Morris, said the older man, and this is Agent Williams. We're sorry to bother you so late, but we received information that you were with Walter Harmon today. Emily felt a chill of fear. How did they know that? So what? Asked Nathan cautiously. Walter Harmon is dead, said Agent Williams abruptly. He was found at home 2 hours ago with a bullet in his head. Emily put her hand to her mouth, horrified. Dead, but we just... Exactly, said Morris. You were probably the last people to see him alive. That's why we need you to come with us to make a statement. We can go to the station early tomorrow morning, said Nathan. It's very late for... It's not a request, said Williams, and Emily noticed he had positioned himself between them and the door. It's an order. That's when Emily realized something was wrong. The men's behavior was too aggressive for federal agents in a routine investigation. And there was something familiar about Agent Morris's face. You, she said, recognizing him from one of the photographs in Walter's documents. You were in the photos. You worked for Olivia. Morris smiled coldly. Smart girl. Too bad, too smart. Williams drew a pistol, pointing it directly at Emily. The evidence. Where is the evidence that Walter gave you? Nathan tried to draw his own weapon, but Williams was faster. Don't move, Montgomery. One wrong move and your girlfriend dies. What do you want? Asked Nathan, forcing himself to stay calm. We want you both to disappear, said Morris. Just like your parents disappeared, Emily. Just like Walter just disappeared. Why? Emily tried to buy time. Olivia is dead. Her organization is finished. Olivia was just the face of the organization, laughed Williams. You think a woman alone could run an operation of that size? She had bosses. Bosses who don't like loose ends. It was then that Emily heard a familiar sound, footsteps she knew on the stairs. Ruth appeared in the hall, but she didn't look like the sweet, concerned woman they knew. Her eyes were cold, calculating. Did you find the evidence? She asked the men. Emily felt as if the world were collapsing again. Ruth, I what, dear? Took care of you? Protected you? Ruth laughed bitterly. I watched you. For 15 years I've been watching this house, reporting everything that happens here. But you knew my grandmother. Dorothy was my sister, said Ruth coldly. My foolish sister, who fell in love with a lost cause and decided to play heroine. When she ran away with you, the organization gave me a choice. Either I found you two, or my entire family would die. Nathan moved slightly, trying to position himself better, but Williams immediately reacted. Stay still. Ruth, where are the documents? In the study. They were examining everything when I arrived. Emily remembered that she had left the study window open. Ruth could have entered through the balcony and observed them without their noticing. You killed Walter, said Emily. more as a statement than a question. "Not personally," said Ruth, "but it was necessary." He knew too much for too long. Williams gestured to Morris, who headed toward the study. Emily and Nathan were left alone with Williams and Ruth, knowing that in a few minutes Morris would return with all the evidence that could destroy the criminal organization. "Nathan," whispered Emily, "the gun you hid in the library." He nodded almost imperceptibly. There was a second weapon hidden in the library, on the other side of the hall, if they could get there. "Ruth," said Emily aloud, "why did you do this? Why did you pretend to like me all these years?" "Who said I pretended?" Ruth seemed genuinely sad for a moment. "I do like you, Emily. You remind me so much of Dorothy when she was young, but some things are more important than feelings." "Like money?" "Like survival. You have no idea how dangerous these people are. They killed an entire family for less." Williams was growing impatient. "Enough talk, let's end this." That's when the lights went out. In the total darkness that followed, Emily heard Nathan shout, "Get down!" and threw herself on the floor. Shots echoed through the house, and she heard footsteps running in various directions. A strong hand grabbed her in the dark. "It's me," whispered Nathan. "Let's get to the library." They crawled across the floor, guiding themselves only by touch, while voices shouted throughout the house. Williams and Morris were searching for them with flashlights, their beams of light cutting through the darkness like swords. They reached the library, and Nathan felt behind the books until he found the second pistol. "Emily, do you know how to shoot?" "No." "Then stay behind me, and if something happens to me, run to the cliff and hide among the rocks. I won't leave you." "Emily!" "No," she interrupted him. "We got into this together. We'll get out together." A beam of light appeared in the library doorway. Williams had found them. "Come out of there or I'll shoot," he shouted. Nathan prepared for the confrontation, knowing that in the next few minutes everything would be decided. If they managed to survive the night, they would have a chance to expose the truth and finally be free. If they didn't succeed, well, at least they would be together until the end. The beam of light from Williams's flashlight cut through the darkness of the library like a blade. Emily could hear his heavy breathing and cautious footsteps as he approached the bookshelves where she and Nathan were hiding. "I know you're in there," said Williams, his voice filled with false calm. "Make this easy for all of us." Nathan squeezed Emily's hand and whispered in her ear, "When I say 3, you run for the window." "I won't leave you," she whispered back. "Emily." A shot echoed through the house, coming from the study. Morris screamed in pain, and then they heard the sound of someone falling. Williams was confused for a moment, diverting his attention. It was the chance Nathan had been waiting for. He stood up and fired, hitting Williams in the shoulder. The man stumbled but didn't fall, trying to aim back. That's when a new voice echoed through the house. "FBI! Surround the house!" Williams froze, realizing he was trapped. Through the windows, Emily could see flashlights and beams of light approaching from all directions. "How did they know?" muttered Williams, bleeding but still holding his gun. The answer came when Ruth appeared in the library doorway, but not alone. She was handcuffed, accompanied by 2 real FBI agents. "Because I called them," she said, her face marked with tears. "I couldn't take it anymore, Emily, when I saw they were going to hurt you." Williams tried to shoot Ruth, but Nathan was faster. His second shot hit Williams in the chest, who fell heavily among the bookshelves. In the next few minutes, the mansion filled with police officers. Emily found herself in Nathan's arms, both trembling from adrenaline and the relief of being alive. The agent in charge of the operation, a man named Cooper, explained to them what had happened. "We received an anonymous call from Ruth 2 hours ago," he said. "She told us everything. About the organization, about the murders, about Walter. We managed to get to his house before he died, but he was badly wounded. Before being taken to the hospital, he told us where you were and that you were in danger." "Walter is alive?" asked Emily, hopefully. "He is. Wounded, but alive. And the evidence he kept all these years will destroy what remains of Olivia's organization." Emily looked at Ruth, who was sitting in an armchair with her hands cuffed, crying silently. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you change your mind?" Ruth looked at her with eyes red from crying. Because when Williams said they were going to kill you, I saw my sister Dorothy. I saw how she would have felt knowing I let the girl she gave her life to protect die at my hands. And your family? The threats? My family died 5 years ago, confessed Ruth. Cancer, accident, old age. I continued working for them out of fear, but there was no one left to protect but myself. And I realized that a life based on fear isn't worth living. Agent Cooper approached Emily. Miss Carter, we'll need your detailed testimony, but I can tell you that with the evidence we have, we'll finally bring justice for your parents' deaths. And Ruth? She'll answer for her crimes, but her cooperation will certainly be considered. She gave us information that will lead to the arrest of many important people. In the weeks that followed, the story of Olivia Montgomery's criminal organization occupied the headlines of newspapers across the country. Dozens of arrests were made. Businessmen, politicians, corrupt police officers. The money laundering scheme that had operated for years was finally exposed. Emily testified before a federal jury, telling the story of her parents and how Dorothy had saved her by creating a new identity for her. It was painful to relive everything, but also liberating. Finally, Thomas and Sarah Carter received justice. Nathan sold the Montgomery Company and donated a large part of the money to organizations that fought organized crime. I want something good to come out of all this pain, he told Emily. Ruth was sentenced to 8 years in prison, but with the possibility of parole in 4. On the day of sentencing, she asked to speak with Emily. I know I can never forgive myself for what I did, she said, but I want you to know that the moments I spent caring for you were the only truly good ones in my life in the last 15 years. Emily held the hand of the woman who had been like a second mother to her. I forgive you, Ruth. Dorothy would forgive you too. 6 months after the confrontation at the mansion, Emily and Nathan were back at the cliff where everything had begun. But this time it wasn't a place of death and sadness. It was a place of rebirth. The Montgomery mansion had been completely renovated. The somber walls were now light and luminous. The windows that were always closed before now let in the sun and the sea breeze. The garden, which had been neglected for years, was blooming again. I still can't believe you wanted to stay here, said Emily, embracing Nathan on the porch that overlooked the ocean. This house witnessed a lot of pain, he said, but it's also where we found each other, where we fell in love. I want it to witness our happiness too. Emily looked at the engagement ring on her finger. Simple, elegant, perfect. Nathan had proposed to her the same night that the last members of the criminal organization were arrested. Are you sure you won't have nightmares here? She asked. The only dreams I have here are of you, he said, kissing her softly. They had decided to marry in the spring, in a simple ceremony in the mansion's garden. Walter, who had fully recovered from his injuries, would be the one to walk her down the aisle. It's the least I can do for the daughter of my best informant, he had said. At night, as they lay in the bed that once belonged to Nathan and Olivia, Emily sometimes still thought about the strange journey that had brought them here. Do you think our children will ask about the history of this house? She asked. They will, said Nathan, caressing her hair, and we'll tell them the truth. That sometimes people do terrible things, but that love can always transform darkness into light. And if they ask how we met? Nathan smiled. We'll say that you came to clean my house and ended up cleaning my soul. Emily laughed. That's terribly romantic. You turned me into a terribly romantic man. The next morning, Emily woke up early and went to the kitchen to prepare coffee. Through the window, she could see Nathan in the garden, watering the flowers. They had planted together where there were once only weeds. The house was full of light, of life, of possibilities. The ghosts of the past had finally been exorcised, not by rituals or prayers, but by love and truth. Her cell phone rang. It was Walter. Emily, child, how are things going over there? Perfect, she said, watching Nathan in the garden. Finally perfect. I'm glad to hear it. Your parents would be proud of the strong woman you've become. Thank you, Walter, for everything. No, Emily, thank you, for having the courage to seek the truth, even when it hurt. After hanging up, Emily went out to the garden and joined Nathan among the flowers. He pulled her into his arms and they danced right there without music, just with the sound of the wind and the waves. "You know what's the most amazing thing about all this?" she said. "What?" "That, despite all the pain, all the tragedy, all the darkness, we found each other. We found love amid the chaos." Nathan kissed her long and deep, as if wanting to seal forever that moment of perfect peace. "I love you, Emily Carter," he said. "And I love you, Nathan Montgomery," she replied. There, at the top of the cliff where so many tears had been shed, where so much blood had been spilled, where so many secrets had been buried, two wounded souls finally found healing in each other. The Montgomery mansion, which for so long had been a prison of dark memories, transformed into what it should always have been, a home. A place where love could grow, flourish, and multiply for generations. And when the sun set that night, painting the sky pink and gold, Emily and Nathan stood on the porch watching the spectacle, knowing they had not only survived the storm, but emerged from it stronger, more united, more alive than they had ever felt. The past was finally at peace.